and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Good morning. My name is Angel Paul. You're listening to Victims to Victorious on the Black Talk Radio Network. The discussion today is about lockdown scenarios. Follow me on Twitter, On Air Angel. So what we're looking at today is the evolution of active shooter scenario drills and how children are impacted by it, and if active shooter drills will prove to be effective. We don't know that yet. That's kind of a cursing and a blessing. And if students are better protected if their principals and teachers are armed. So let me tell you a little bit about the etymology. As you know, I am using epidemiological principles, and they believe in what they call retrospective case analysis. They also believe in evidence-based medicine. So when we take a look at how the lockdown drills evolved, we've got to mention the Columbine shooting. So one of the paradigms of radio is that the first time you hear something is the first time you hear something. That's why certain records are played over and over and over again at infinitum. So for listeners who may not exactly remember what happened, I'm going to provide some details of the Columbine shooting because that is the beginning of the mass shooter lockdown drills that we now see in school. At Columbine High School in Littletown, Colorado, and I'm reading from History.com, two teens went on a shooting spree on April 20th, 1999, killing 13 people and wounding more than 20 others before turning the guns on themselves. The Columbine shooting was at the time the worst high school shooting in U.S. history, and again, I'm saying at the time, and promoted a national debate on gun control and school safety, as well as major investigations to determine what motivated the gunman. Eric Harris, who was 18, and Dylan Klebold, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing, Klebold, his friend, who was 17. If I'm not pronouncing these things correctly, call in and let me know, or post a message once the show is archived. At approximately 11:19 a.m., again reading from history.com/topic/90s, Columbine school shootings. At approximately 11:19 a.m., Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, dressed in trench coats, began shooting fellow students outside Columbine High School, located in a suburb south of Denver. The pair then moved inside the school, where they gunned down many of their victims in the library. By approximately 11:30 a.m., Klebold and Harris had killed 12 students and a teacher and wounded more than 20 other people. Shortly after 12 p.m., the two teens turned their guns on themselves. I'm stepping away from the article. The weapons that they had were owned by their relatives. They got their arsenal from their relatives. Investigators later learned, reading the article again from History.com, Harris and Klebold had arrived in separate cars at Columbine around 11:10 a.m. on the morning of the massacre. The two walked into the school cafeteria where they placed 2 duffel bags each containing a 20-pound propane bomb set to explode at 11:17 a.m. The teens then went back outside to the cars to wait for the bombs to go off. When the bombs failed to detonate, Harris and Klebold began their shooting spree. In the days immediately following the shootings, it was speculated that Harris and Klebold purposely chose athletes, minorities, and Christians as their victims. It initially was reported that one student, Cassie Bernal, was asked by one of the if she believed in God. When Bernal allegedly said yes, she was shot to death. Her parents later wrote a book titled She Said Yes, honoring their daughter. However, it was later determined that the question was not posed to Bernal, but to another student. So we're discussing the Columbine High School shooting. Why is that? Because after the Columbine High School shooting, schools around the country, and this was on April 20th, 1999, they began to do lockdown drills. Now, lockdown drills for mass shooters actually have a legacy in fire drills and tornado drills. So what I want the listeners to understand here is I'm going to explain some of the background of a really tragic fire that help people understand about architecture, safety, and first responders. The example I'm going to use is called the Collinwood School Fire. And, of course, those of you who are listening to me know that we're broadcasting from Cleveland, Ohio. And Collinwood is a neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. My mom used to teach there. The entertainer Steve Harvey is from there. The article on Wikipedia, again, if you're an academic or a college student, you're going to have other references besides Wikipedia. But the article states that the Collinwood School Fire is also known as the Lakeview School, which, of course, is a reference to Lake Erie. So here's what I want you to understand. Before we had mass shooters, we had fires in school. The Lakeview School was a fire trap, reading from Wikipedia. During the fire, the school's masonry exterior acted as a chimney, sucking flame upward as the wooden interior burned. So I want to thank retired Chief DeKalb Walcott for helping me understand what the chimney effect is. So the chimney effect, the heat moves up the stairwell when it goes up. So when it moves up, the heat rises. And there were not 2x4s installed, which are called fire breaks, that help get rid of the flame being accelerated in the wall. So instead, you get a blowtorch effect, which moves slow inside the wall, but the convection, CONVECTION process, continues to allow the flames to move upward. The article in Wikipedia says that they believe that the fire could have started in the basement. And, of course, this is consistent with the chimney effect because the stairwell is an open space and the fire starts to move freely up and through the stories of the building. So the article is important because there are hundreds of children killed and faculty members at the fire. The fire starts on March 4th, 1908, and I'm trying to recall the number of children and staff members. Almost half the children and 2 teachers in the building died. And of course, in 1908, there are not fire drills imposed in school. So those of you who are my age or older know that we had fire drills. Now, those of us who lived in the Midwest, like I grew up in the same town, we talked about the Collinwood Fire of 1908, Again, I want to thank retired Chief DeKalb Walcott for explaining the chimney effect. If you are a firefighter or a mason or chimney sweep and you want to call in and lend your expertise, we welcome it, or posting it on the comments page on blacktalkradionetwork.com. Look for Victims to Victorious. So from fire drills, we're moving to tornado drills. So tornado drills are something that we experience in the Midwest because of course, the Midwest has more of them than other parts of the state. Tornadoes are different from hurricanes. Hurricanes need salt water in the ocean. A tornado drill is a procedure, according to Wikipedia, of practicing to take cover in a specified location in the event that a tornado strikes an area. This safety drill is an important element of tornado preparedness. Generally, your local town will let you know if a spout has touched ground, if you need to be prepared. The term tornado preparedness refers to safety precautions, again, this is Wikipedia, made from the arrival of and during a tornado. Historically, the steps taken have varied greatly depending on location. What I remember growing up as a child in the Midwest is that we would have to get underneath the desk. And so the teacher would ask us to go underneath the desk. And sometimes we would actually be asked to go into the closet. Really old elementary schools where I grew up in Shaker Heights, Ohio, had a coat room. And sometimes she would ask us to go into the coat room because it was away from the windows. So we learned what some of the exposures were. And in this discussion of gun violence, I've often referenced the work of Lisa Rose-Rodriguez as to what exposures are. In a paradigm of public health, an exposure helps you understand how you are at risk for an event. So very common things. You don't have to be a medical doctor. You can just be a normal human being. If you go to work and a lot of people are coughing and sneezing around you, some of them have true allergies based on the air conditioning or some other kind of pathogen, but other people have a cold. So rhinoviruses, those are the whole group of common colds. They can be spread because of lack of hand washing, sneezing, etc. So you as a person can protect yourself in this way, washing your hands, throwing away your tissues, wiping off your face, using hand sanitizer, etc. So there's an exposure related to a healthcare event that causes morbidity and mortality. So in the context of understanding these lockdown drills, people had to understand what a tornado was. And so they may strike quickly with no warning. They may appear nearly transparent until dust and debris are picked up. The average tornado moves southwest to northeast. But tornadoes have also been known to move in any direction. The average forward speed of a tornado is 30 miles per hour. And water spouts are tornadoes that form over water. And of course, in the Midwest, we're talking about forming over lakes and rivers. Tornadoes actually have a time frame. They're most likely to occur between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. So that is how these type of drills have developed. So we've looked at fires, like the Collinwood fire. So that was 1908. Now, in 1958, I believe, there was another fire that occurs at a school in Los Angeles. Our Lady of Angels was an elementary school comprising kindergartner through 8th grade. If you've been to Catholic school, that's the normal format. It was located at 909, it's actually in Chicago, Lady of Angels. 909 North Avers Avenue in Humboldt Park area on Chicago's west side on the northeast corner of West Iowa Street and North Avers American. The neighborhood had originally been an Irish-American neighborhood, but it gradually developed into the first 20th century into a largely Italian-American neighborhood. The school was one of several buildings associated with a large Roman Catholic church. allowing for a grandfather cause, this is from Wikipedia, Our Lady of the Angel School Fire, allowing for a grandfather cause that did not require schools to retrofit to a new standard if they already met previous regulations. The school legally complied with the state of Illinois and city of Chicago fire codes of 1958 and was generally considered cleaned and well maintained. At the time, fire sprinklers were primarily found in factories or new school construction, and the modern smoke detector does not become commercially available until 1969. And when I was preparing for the show, Chief DeKalb Walcott, retired chief of Chicago, he was a trailblazer in making smoke detectors part of the policy and installation to prevent fires. So what happens is this school, the Our Lady of Angels School fire occurs. So after the fire occurs, we then see schools all around the country developing fire drills. But there have been many fires that predicate this. I began the show with talking about a fire that is 1908, so 50 years before that. So let's describe this fire that is actually tragic enough for people to say, hey, what if we do more in the schools? The fire began in the basement of the older North Wing between about 2 p.m. and 2:20 p.m. Central Time. It's 11:19 a.m. Eastern Time. Ohio is on Eastern Time. Indiana and Illinois are on Central Time. Classes were agreed to be dismissed at 3 p.m. Ignition took place in a cardboard trash barrel located a few feet from the northeast stairwell. Remember, we talked about the chimney effect. The fire smoldered undetected for approximately 20 minutes, gradually heating the stairwell and filling it with a light gray smoke that would later become thick and black as other combustibles became involved. At the same time, it began sending superheated air gases into an open pipe chase very near the source of the floor. So this fire, this fire is important because, and after this fire occurs, people around the country decide that schools can be safer by having a fire drill. It is 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time. If you just joined us, we are discussing the etymology of lockdown drills. So we're going back to fire drills and tornado drills. One of the fires that is credited with changing the policy in elementary schools occurred in Chicago in 1958. I'm returning to the Wikipedia article. If you are online, it's called Our Lady of the Angels School Fire. For 329 children and 5 teaching nuns, the only remaining means of escape was to jump from their second-floor window to the concrete or crushed rock 25 feet below, or to wait for the fire department to rescue them. Recognizing the trap they were in, some of the nuns encouraged the children to sit at their desks or gather in a semicircle, and pray. But smoke, heat, and flames quickly forced them to the window. One nun, Sister Mary Davis Devine, ordered her students in room 209 to place books and furniture in front of her classroom doors, as this helped to slow the entry of smoke and flames until rescuers arrived. Out of the 55 students in the room, 8 escaped with injuries, 2 died. Beverly Berger, the last student remaining in the room, eventually passed out from smoke inhalation and died when the roof collapsed. Another student, Valerie Toma, died at the hospital on March 10, 1959, as a result of her extensive burn injuries. And of course, back then they weren't doing the kinds of things they do now, where they can transplant your skin. So this is one of the ways that fire drills have begun. So we began the show talking about lockdown drills. So that's been the past. So children were killed in schools because of fire. That's the basic, simple message. So the Columbine shooting allowed people to say, well, wait a minute now, there is a new danger in the school. The Columbine shooting occurred April 20th, 1999. So from then on, people began to look, school administrators, policymakers, etc., began to look at lockdown drills. Now, a more recent shooting, that is the Sandy Hook shooting, also caused policymakers to reevaluate this. So the people on Twitter who follow me are upset about lockdown drills because they say that the scenario is misguided. So I'm going to read a little bit from that. There was an article on theatlantic.com. It says, active shooter drills are tragically misguided. There's scant evidence that they're effective. So I've introduced you, the listeners, before into what the research ethics and paradigms are. Fortunately, we don't have a way to measure that. And what do I mean? There have not been enough shootings in schools where the lockdown drills have been used for policymakers and stakeholders to determine if they are effective. That's kind of a mixed blessing. So I'm going to read from this article on theatlantic.com, published earlier this year. At 10:20 a.m. on December 6th, Lake Brantley High School in Florida initiated a code red lockdown. This is not a drill, a voice announced over the PA system. At the same moment, teachers received a text message warning of an active shooter on campus. Fearful students took shelter in classrooms. Many sobbed hysterically, and others vomited or fainted, and some sent farewell notes to their parents. Here I'm going to deviate from the article. My daughter's school had a lockdown drill a few years ago. She's in graduate school now at the University of Connecticut. And one of the interesting things that occurred is the children who had cell phones started texting their parents. They knew they couldn't call about the lockdown drill. But we didn't know why it had occurred. And so many parents started calling the school back, and some parents drove up to the school. So the technology and the frightening nature of it have not been totally evaluated yet. In other words, we don't have total clarity. And as it turns out, the lockdown was not really because of an active shooter. So this is something that needs to be clarified by parents. I remember going to the meeting afterwards, and many parents were completely hysterical because the children texting only said that they were locked in their classroom, and the parents did not have any idea. You have to understand the context of this a little bit further. This particular lockdown drill is going on at a high school in Connecticut about 2 years after the Newtown shooting. So I'm returning to the article on theatlantic.com. Teachers received a text message warning of an active shooter on campus. Fearful students took shelter in classrooms. Many sobbed hysterically. A later announcement prompted a stampede in the cafeteria. Students fled the building, and parents flooded 911 with frantic calls. That's just what I told you happened to me in a real-life situation in Manchester, Connecticut. Later it was revealed to the fury of parents, teachers, and students that, in fact, this was a drill, the most realistic in a series of drills that the students of Lake Brantley, like students across the country, have lately endured. In the years since the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School last February, efforts to prepare the nation's students for gunfire have intensified. Educators and safety experts have urged students to deploy such unlikely self-defense tools as hockey pucks, rocks, flip-flops, and canned food. More commonly, preparations include lockdown drills in which students sit in darkened classrooms with the shades pulled. Sometimes a teacher or police officer plays the role of a shooter, moving through the hallway and attempting to open doors as children practice staying silent. These drills are not limited to older grades. Around the country, young children are being taught to run in zigzag patterns as to evade bullets. The writer states, I've heard of kindergartners where words like barricade are added to the vocabulary list, as 5- and 6-year-olds are instructed to stack chairs and desks like a fort should they need to keep a gunman at bay. In one Massachusetts kindergarten classroom hangs a poster with lockdown instructions that can be sung to the tune, I want the listeners to get ready, of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And it goes, lock down, lock the door, shut the lights off, say no more. Beside the text and picture cues, a key locking a door, a person holding up a finger to hush the class, a switch being flipped to turn off the lights, the alarm and confusion of younger students is hardly assuaged by the implausible excuses some teachers offer. For instance, that they're practicing what to do if a wild bear enters the classroom, or that they have an extra quiet time. As someone who is taught in every grade from preschool to college, there isn't a clear rule for the teachers enforcing the rule as how to tell the children that their lives at risk, because the children are so young when they're 5 or 6 years old. It's 11:29 a.m., and we're talking about the etymology, the beginning and the precursors of lockdown drills. We are broadcasting on blacktalkradionetwork.com. My name is Angel Fall. You can follow me on Twitter at onairangel.com. If you wish to call in right now, we are taking live calls. Later on, we will also, you can also feel free to post a message on the Black Talk Radio Network page where you can type in V2V, Victims to Victorious, and you will see a comment page. If you wish to call in, the toll-free number is 1-866-510-9025. We'll be back after this station identification.
Hi, the Black Talk Media Project would like to invite you to become a member of the BTR Community subscription-based social media platform. BTR Community is a platform that was set up for the listening audience of Black Talk Radio Network, the #1 independent Black radio network online. For just $24 per year, your subscription gives you access to an interactive space to share information with like-minded people with your privacy guaranteed. Your subscription will go a long way to help us maintain and improve our current media platforms. It will also help provide a budget so that we can begin the task of establishing localized media centers and radio stations across the United States. The best way to show your support and appreciation for what we do here at Black Talk Radio is to subscribe. Help us to help you be informed. Join btrcommunity.com today.
Make Black Talk Radio your choice for digital black radio. New black media for the new millennium.
Thank you for tuning in to Victims to Victorious on BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com. I'm Angel Fall. My engineer is the founder of the Black Talk Radio Network, Scotty Reed, and we are discussing the use of active shooter drills or lockdown drills post the Columbine and Sandy Hook school shooting. If your child has been traumatized by that, if you are a teacher who disapproves of it, I'd like to hear from you. We are live for the next 28 minutes. The phone number to call is 704-802-5056, 704-802-5056. I'm Angel Fall, and I want to continue with some of the critique about the drills.
Angel.
So there is an article. Go ahead,
Yes,
Scotty.
yes, Angel. Good morning. Good morning to the listeners. Before you go into that, right before we went to the break, and you talked about very young children going through these drills. As you know, I have two grandsons. I have I know how many grandchildren I have. I have 6 grandchildren, but
Congratulations.
But only 2 of them are in school right now, and they're elementary school age. And I was just thinking, these active shooter drills, I hope they are not traumatizing these children and telling them, this is a drill. So in case somebody comes into the school and shoots it up and tries to kill you, I don't think a 6-year, well, not a 6-year-old, but they're 10 and 9. My grandsons. I don't think they need to hear something like that. I think that kind of robs them of their innocence, so to speak. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a drill, but I don't think that you should be telling the children exactly, what the drill is for to stop, people from killing you coming into the school. So that's just my initial thought on that. I don't know, if I would be comfortable with it being described to them in that way.
Well, I definitely appreciate your input here. You are a grandparent. I'm not a grandparent yet. And I do know in preparing for the show, I was gathering some data. And there is a woman I know who works at an elementary school. And she runs the lockdown drill. And she blows a whistle. She takes them to the designated safe place. And she actually tells them, there's someone who will be coming to the school to harm us, and if you don't stay quiet, he will find you and harm you. She actually says that. I know her colleague, and her colleague simply says you need to be quiet because this person is scary and we don't want him to find us. Now, both of those women are actually dealing with the same age group. And their age group is mixed, actually, because in a after-school and before-care program, they have ages kindergarten to 4th grade. So this is how they conduct it. Now, what do I want to say this anecdotal here? I began the show saying that I was a substitute teacher in the state of Connecticut when Sandy Hook occurred, and I could never return to teaching elementary school. But because of Columbine, though, there were already lockdown drills in place. And I remember I was teaching at a school where each classroom had a back door to the courtyard. And I remember telling myself, now this is before Sandy Hook, and I remember telling myself, I'm not going to go to the gym and lock the door. If the children and I can get out that back door, we're running. Because I have been shot at before. So much of this, the truth is, Scotty, if you talk to people who are gun owners or in law enforcement, they don't believe the children should really just sit there. They don't believe the teacher should just really sit there. The Sandy Hook shooter kills students in a classroom. And the students who he doesn't kill, one teacher was able to get into a coat room where she could lock the door. So the scariness for the children, 5 and 6-year-olds don't understand that you can die. Death is an abstract. And I'm going to answer your question further by telling you that there are not real federal regulations on how these could go. The fire drills and the tornado drills are very, very, what's the word I want? They're very similar. If you transfer to another school and the teacher says this is a fire drill, you're going to walk out the back door orderly. You can't take the elevator if the school has the elevator. There's a lot of codification. But here's some of the discrepancies with the active shooter drills, and you would, of course, be a person who agrees with this, that they are traumatizing. Because in preparing for the show, I also read something else. In the tornado drill, for those of us who live in the Midwest, or a fire drill, the firemen don't come in a fire drill and set the school on fire. They don't simulate a fire. They don't put smoke in the hallway. In a tornado drill, nobody throws wind machines at the windows and throws debris around. But in the lockdown shooter drills, it's something different. So here's something for Scotty and the listeners who believe their children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews are being traumatized. Stories have sprung up around the country of law enforcement officials actually firing blanks in hallways to demonstrate the sound of gunfire, pelting teachers with projectiles, and showing video footage from actual shootings as part of their staff training exercise. This article is from edweek.org/EW/article/2019-324. I felt more traumatized than trained active shooter.
Wow.
So in this same scenario, go ahead, Scotty.
No, I was just saying, wow. I do have another comment, but I want you to finish.
Okay, so these are teachers complaining about the drill. Teachers were shot execution style with plastic pellets. I want to explain this again. I've actually seen the pictures. They make the teachers lie out in the hallway. Some of them actually do this to students too. Teachers were shot execution style with plastic pellets, leaving some with welts and bruises because, of course, blanks can kill you, and beanbag shooting can kill you too. These experiences, educators say, can be physically and emotionally painful and don't necessarily prepare anyone for an actual shooting scenario, which actually happens very rarely. One of the teachers, her name is Elizabeth Yanelli, this is public information, in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania, says, I felt more traumatized than trained. She went through an active shooter drill a few years ago in which teachers were shot with airsoft guns so they could practice stopping a shooter in the cafeteria. We had colleagues shooting colleagues, she said. We had people getting hit with plastic pellets. And here's what I said in preparing for the show, and another teacher says this also. She says, we don't light fires in the hallway to practice fire drills. That's where I'm going with this. That Collinwood fire of 1908, the fire in Chicago in the 1950s. We don't light fires in the hallway to practice fire drills, and we seem to teach that protocol pretty well, says Melissa Reeves, the past president of the National Association of School Psychologists. We can prepare for an active shooter situation without the need of those super intense and potentially traumatizing drills. At the training in Indiana in January, in which teachers were told to kneel down and face a classroom wall before being shot multiple times with the plastic pellets, terrified teachers were screaming. A representative from the Indiana State Teachers Association testified to state lawmakers last week. The story, which spread rapidly online, put educators concerned about the nature of school safety training under a massive spotlight. So go ahead, Scotty.
Well, two things. First, it sounded like they were just training to get shot. That's what it sounded like to me. There was a program before the host because he had gotten some employment that he could no longer do the show because of the position he had and the time it was taking him with this new position. But we've had these discussions before, like, for example, the Pulse nightclub shooting. Remember that? That happened in, where was that? Orlando, Florida. Now, you're in a bar. Somebody comes in and they just start shooting. What do? Of course, if there's a way to escape the building, which I feel like would be the best thing, as I think you were relaying in a school situation. Even if there's no door, there's a window. If there's a window, I'm getting out of there. If I hear gunshots in the hallway, I'm going out the window and trying to get as far away as possible. And if I'm the teacher, I'm picking these children up and help and assisting them in getting out. But in a situation like the nightclub shooting, and this even was reported during the recent El Paso Walmart shooting, is that you're in a bar, you're in Walmart, you have weapons. What are those weapons? Bottles, chairs, anything that you can throw at the shooter. If everybody just start throwing at the shooter, that gives other opportunities for the person to take them down. And at UNCC Charlotte, University of North Carolina in Charlotte, they had a shooter situation. I think that was this year, might have been earlier this year. Only three, I think up to 3 or 4 people were actually shot. Very low fatalities in comparison to what we saw, at some of these other places. And to me, the reason why is because you had individuals engage the shooter, even though they were unarmed. Enough of them engaged that shooter that they were able to take him down and give other people a chance to escape. And a couple of them lost their lives. But to me, just cowering in a classroom is not the answer. To me, if you want a lesson, and I'm not making the case to arm teachers or anything like that. I'm just saying that I don't think just cowering in place, and when you got an active shooter actively hunting you down in the school to stay in place is the right answer.
And you would be exactly right. The sentiment, the paradigm, the discussion is mixed. So when I have participated in the active shooter drills at an elementary school. And one of the things that I discovered that made me extremely nervous is that the students were not quiet. It's part of this is how you get the students quiet. And the students are not believing that this could really happen. It's an abstract. So if your drill is based on the fact that you're sequestered, and if this is a war, there's deception. So the deception is there's no one in the room. But if the shooter hears the voices and the giggling, so this one teacher I know who does it, she tells them, if you giggle, he will find us and he will shoot you. She tells them that. And I think it's good that she tells them that because it causes them to be quiet, but the understanding of lethality and death is absent in children who are that little. And the other part of that is many of the middle-class teachers, unless they are, former soldiers or hunt, they don't have a concept of weaponry and lethality. They themselves, and this is why I'm not critical of the police for this, because an active shooter, as we know, for instance, in Newtown, he kills every adult who steps to him. So this, of course, becomes a discussion for, what if there were faculty members who were armed? All the adults he kills are female, of course, including his mother. And I agree with you, and other law enforcement people agree. I mean, you and I, Scotty, are old enough to know when the gym teacher and the male social studies teacher got into a fight, they were on talk radio, they whooped that ass and then called your parents, and you had to answer to the teacher for him having to beat you down in a school fight. But with all female teachers, it's easy for the male gunman to overpower, and there's no one who's going to jump on him and knock him down. One of the things I've said anecdotally is that these school shooters, they don't show up at the football team practice because there are too many football players who will take that chance. That's all there is to it. So we are discussing the actual effectiveness of the lockdown drills and how many of the school teachers are saying that they are more traumatic than effective because we don't light fires in the school. We don't create a movie set with a windstorm for tornado drills. And for those of you who are listening, we have less than 15 minutes to go. And I just want to review another one of the shootings that has heavily influenced the lockdown drill policy. Scotty, did I answer your question and provide insight?
Yes.
Okay. So if you just tuned in, my name is Angel Fall. We are broadcasting on Black Talk Radio Network. The Black Talk Radio Network hosts Victims to Victorious every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Angel Fall. You can follow me on Air Angel. You can also go to Black Talk Radio Network and look for Victims to Victorious to leave a comment about today's show or another show, which, of course, Scotty archived. So we are reviewing one of the other school shootings where the policy of lockdown drills has been influenced by and it has increased the execution of these drills. As of November 30th, 2012, 456 children were enrolled in kindergarten to fourth grade at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Of course, the shooting occurs on December 14th. On December 14th, 2012, Lanza, I'm reading from Wikipedia, but Adam Lanza shot and killed his mother, Nancy Lanza, around 9:30 a.m. at their Newtown home. One of the things that the listeners may not understand is that in Connecticut, we have boroughs like New York City. So when people say Newtown, so you have to understand that we have towns that are within towns. That's the best way I can describe it. So at 9:30 a.m., he shot his mother, and she had 4 gunshot wounds to her head. He then drove to the Sandy Hook Elementary School. When I was living in Connecticut, the reports were that she had been a substitute teacher at the school. The mass shooting begins at 9:35 a.m. His mother had acquired, we talked about straw purchasing, etc., in a previous show, a Bushmaster XM15 E2S rifle, 10 magazines with 30 rounds each. Lanza shot his way through a glass panel next to the locked front entrance door of the school. He was wearing black clothing, yellow earplugs, sunglasses, and an olive green utility vest. The initial reports that he actually had on body armor were incorrect. Principal, again, the principal is female. Her name is Dawn Hawksprung, and school psychologist Mary Sherlock were meeting with other faculty members when they heard, but they didn't recognize gunshots. And that's something that I also want to talk about here. There's a context to listening, to hearing what gunshots are. I have been shot at an inner city park. Since relocating to Cleveland, Ohio, people shoot for 2 or 3 hours on New Year's Day. I have found bullets in my yard. So understanding what those sounds are is actually a protective measure for people understanding that they are at risk. So lead teacher Natalie Hammond went into the hall to determine the source of the sounds and encountered Lanza. A faculty member who was at the meeting said that the 3 women called out, "Shooter, stay put," which alerted their colleagues to the danger and saved their lives. Again, this is happening after Columbine, so some things are in its place. A teacher's aide heard the shots. Another teacher hiding in the math lab heard school janitor Rick Thornell put the gun down, and he survived. Lanza, however, killed both Hawksprung and Sherlock. Hammond was hit first in the leg and then sustained another gunshot wound. She lay still in the hallway and then, not hearing any more noise, crawled back to the conference room and pressed her body against the door to keep it closed. She was later treated at Danbury Hospital, and this is all suburban New York City. Connecticut is suburban New York City. in those counties that are the furthest south, and some partially west. A 9-year-old boy stated that he heard the shooters say, "Put your hands up," and someone else said, "Don't shoot." He also heard many people yelling and many gunshots over the intercom while he, his classmates, and his teacher took refuge in a closet in the gymnasium. Diane Day, a school therapist who had been at the faculty meeting with Hodgsprung, now that's one of the teachers who shot, heard screaming followed by more gunshots. A second teacher, who was a substitute kindergarten teacher, was wounded in the attack. While she was closing a door further down the hallway, she was hit in the foot with a bullet that ricocheted. Lonza never entered her classroom. School nurse Sally Cox hid under the desk in her office. She later described seeing the door opening and Lonza boots and lace facing her desk from approximately 20 feet. He remained standing for a few seconds before turning around and leaving. What's important about her description is she is an adult, she's a nurse, and she's able to remain quiet. Many of these children in the lockdown shootings, they don't take it seriously and they don't remain quiet. So how effective could this really be? We have about 7 minutes left. My name is Angel Fall. You are listening to Victims to Victorious. We are discussing lockdown drills and are they effective? What happens to children when they are traumatized by this? So someone tweeted the same article that I just read from online. And if your children have experienced an active shooter drill and you feel that they are traumatized, I would like to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter at OnAirAngel. Leave your comments for Victims to Victorious on BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com. We are looking at, how is it that this can be effective, and why is there such a huge difference between the fire drills and the tornado drills? Because the fire drills and the tornado drills don't ever simulate the actual fire or tornado. So here's a little bit more about children's experiences with lockdown drills. This comes from theatlantic.com. A recent analysis by the Washington Post found that during the 2017 to 2018 school year, more than 4.1 million students experienced at least one lockdown drill, including some 22,000 students in kindergarten or preschool. In one sense, the impulse driving these preparations is understandable. The purpose of mass murder in a classroom is intolerable, and good faith proposals for preventing school shootings should be treated with respect. But the current mode of instead preparing kids for such an event is likely to be psychologically damaging. See, for instance, and I'm reading from theatlantic.com, the parting letter of a 12-year-old boy wrote his parents during a lockdown at a school in Charlotte, North Carolina, following what turned out to be a bogus threat. I mentioned earlier in the show that my daughter was texting me and my husband at the time, I'm no longer married, that they were on lockdown, and it turned out to be a fight at the school, and the school administrators chose to use that to keep the children safe. But the context of this after Sandy Hook, for those of us in Connecticut, was absolutely terrifying. So returning to the article at theatlantic.com, the student writes, "I'm so sorry for anything I've done, the trouble I have caused," he scribbled. "Right now I'm scared to death. I need a warm, soft hug. I hope that you're going to be okay with me when I'm gone." As James Hamlin wrote for The Atlantic last February, there's precious little evidence that the current approach is effective. When we started talking about the fire of the Collinwood School fire in 1908, and then the Our Lady of the Angels fire in Chicago approximately 50 years later, we have the ability to say, and Scotty and I went through the fire drills. We walked out the school orderly. The teacher allowed us to put on some hats and mittens when it was winter time. So we have an experience, and the record of this is high. The record is very, very good, because in my memory, I don't even know of a child who was burned at a school. But the schools have not used the lockdown drills long enough for us to understand what the data is, and the drills that they are using are different from the fire drills and the tornado drills, because they actually simulate shootings in some cases. Returning to the Atlantic.com article, in Parkland, for example, the site of the recent shooting when this article was written at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, they had an active shooter drill just last month. The suspect had been through such drills and may have used them to his advantage. And much of social media is talking about the fact, remember I said Columbine was in the 1990s. So if you are a young man who's gone through the drills yourself, you probably know things like where the teachers will go, how the door locks. Certain doors at these older elementary schools have a little lever in the top frame of the door. You don't actually lock the door by the door handle. So there's a lot of evidence that the shooters would know these little small things. What rooms are considered safe? What rooms don't have windows, for example? It's 11:58. We have about 2 minutes to go. We have been discussing the feasibility of lockdown drills in elementary schools and the trauma that they have had on children and teachers when they prepare for these drills. The two seminal cases that have influenced this are Sandy Hook, for instance, and Columbine. In the 1 minute that we have left, I just want to say that arming teachers can introduce new risks into the school. Many people are in favor of that, and we can, of course, talk about that a little bit later. But some of the questions are, what happens if a student gets the gun that the teacher or principal has brought to school? Now you will, in the case of arming teachers in a classroom, you will now have students who might be able to access a gun at the school that the teacher has brought to keep people safe, ironically. It's 12 p.m. You've been listening to Victims to Victorious on the BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com. Tune in next week. I'm Angel Fall. Follow me on Twitter. I will create a couple of hashtags after the show is over. Thank you to all the listeners across the United States and the world.